Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to install a Tusk UTV Seat Heater kit on the newer style of Polaris RZR seat. So you're going to find these on the Turbo R, the Pro R, and like this one, this is the Pro XP. And we've got 2-seater kits as well as 4-seater kits. Now if you have a 4-seater and only want to heat the front 2 seats, just get a 2-seater kit. It's that simple. Now what comes in each kit is your heating elements, your wiring harness. We've got a pulse bar connector as well as the necessary rivets. Now with the design of these seats, it's going to be a little more difficult to get a seat heater installed, but we've done the work and made these kits as easy as possible. And well, it's slightly more in depth than other machines. This video is going to help you get the job done. Now really quick, there's a couple things you want to be aware of. These machines are designed to run accessories, so usually you're not going to have to worry about this, but the 2-seater kit, it's going to draw up to 100 watts. The 4-seater kit is going to take up to 200 watts, which is just over what a 30-inch LED light bar would take. Now, this only matters if you're running a lot of accessories at the same time. So if that's you, you're going to want to check your stator output and make sure it can supply enough power, and that way your battery doesn't run dead. If you need these kits, you can click the link in the description below. That's going to take you to our website. We also have universal options if you have a machine that is different than something we're working on today. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. To get this done, I have some additional zip ties to get everything tied up nice and neat. I've got a paint pen, some duct tape, some spray trim adhesive. Now if you don't have this stuff, you can use a flexible type glue instead. And we are going to be cutting some stuff. So I have a torch and a razor blade to help me cut through some plastic. You don't have to have the torch, but it's going to help you out. Now we are going to be soldering some joints together, or soldering some wires together. So we've got solder, some heat shrink, soldering iron, and a heat gun. Now we are going to be riveting as well. So I have the rivet gun, and on these machines, there's tons of plastic clips everywhere. So we have some pliers to help us remove those. These ones are from Tusk. Now, as far as your common hand tools go, we have 1/8 and 1/4 inch drill bits. We've got 19 and 10 millimeter sockets, T27 and T40 Torx bits. And of course, since we're dealing with wiring, we have some wire strippers. To install these kits, we're going to start with the heating elements first, and then we're going to do the wiring in a later step. So to start out, we need to remove the front and rear seats. Just remember in the back, you have 6 bolts. We're using our T40 Torx bit to remove them. For the front seats, we need to remove this latch assembly. So on this side, I'm removing a plastic cap with a screwdriver. Then we have 2 screws to remove. I'm using a T40 Torx bit. You want to hit this bar out with a 19 millimeter socket. And then we have 3 screws to remove on this latch cover. I'm using a T27. Next, we need to remove these 3 rivets. I'm using a punch to stay centered up, and then a 1/4 inch drill bit to drill them out. Now for the rear seat, on the bottom piece, we've got 2 rails we need to remove by taking out the 6 screws. After that, you want to drill out the 3 rivets. Then we can slide the cushion back and remove it. Now for the upright section, you're going to have 4 rivets that need to be drilled out. And that rear cushion is just going to pop right out. Now for the heating elements, no matter what seat you're working on, you're going to have 1 element going across the bottom and 1 on the back. The only difference is the front seats, it's all going to be on 1 piece. The back seats are going to be split into 2 pieces. Now for all these seats, to get the covers off, there's these little plastic tabs in here. All we need to do is use a screwdriver and pop those out. And then underneath here, on all these in the corners, you're going to have Velcro strips. Be aware of that. We are going to remove some of the strips completely, but in some spots, we're going to leave it there. That's going to help keep the seat cover looking good. Anywhere we need to re-stick a section, we have that spray trim adhesive. On this rear upright section, I'm going to remove these 2 strips as well as the one in the back right there. So at this point, you can set the heating element in place and see how much of this Velcro you can actually use and trim it there. Or if you want, you can reuse those little pieces in the corners, and that's probably actually what I'm going to do. And if this protective cover that keeps the moisture out of the foam. If that tears at any point, you can simply cover it up with a little bit of duct tape. So I'm going to go ahead and spray these and stick them in place. So now that we've let that glue tack up for a minute, I'm going to stick these in place. You can use a little weight on them or something like that if they're still a little too wet to stick on. Now while I let that glue set up, I'm going to cut the heating element to length. Now there's a few things you need to know. You can only cut this lengthwise. So where the wires come in at the bottom, you don't ever want to cut around there or on the sides. So that opposite end of the wire, as soon as you make a cut there, you're just going straight across. And even if you make an L or shape like that in the top, the rest of that section will not heat up anymore. So again, we're going straight across. So I'm just laying this where it needs to be as far as I can go up and then making that cut. Now before I stick that heating element in place, I want to remove all of these old rivets. And you're going to have to get in there through the foam, and you might have to make a little cut with a razor blade or something like that. But that way you don't have that rivet just floating around in there, and it's going to make it easier to install the new rivets. The next step is to line up the heating element, and we're going to start by pulling back this adhesive backing and then stick the element down into place. After that, we're going to use the supplied tape across the top and the bottom. From here, we can go ahead and reinstall the cover. We're just going to make sure we have the corners lined up with those Velcro strips. Then we'll flip the cushion over and make sure all of the tabs are clipped into place. Now, depending on what seat you're doing, the cord's going to go to a different spot. So you always want it going towards the center console. This one is going to be a driver's side seat. If it was a passenger side seat, we'd have this cord coming out of this other spot. Now we can reinstall this vertical cushion back into the seat pan. Now before I rivet the seat on, I'm going to drill 2 holes in this base in between the 2 mounting tabs, and I'm just using an 1/8 inch drill bit to do that. Then I can feed a zip tie through, and then once we have the seat and everything installed, that zip tie is going to hold the wiring out of the way. And now we can install the 4 rivets. Now for the bottom cushion on the rear seat, it's going to be a similar process. Just release the cover by disconnecting all of the tabs all the way around. And then as far as installing the heating element, it's a similar process. You want to make sure the wires are facing the center console, depending whether it's a driver's side or passenger side seat. You'll stick the pad down in the same way and make sure you have that tape on both ends. Now we're going to remove the rivets by making a couple slits on the back side. And with those out, you can reinstall the cover and just make sure all of the tabs are clipped all the way in. Then we can set this on the rear seat pan. Make sure you slide that 1 tab into place, and then we can install the 3 rivets. After that, you want to reinstall the 2 mounting brackets. Now to do the front seats, it's going to be a similar process. To remove the seat, we just need to pull up on this. There's a couple of plastic tabs in the back. We need to remove the cover in a similar way. You do have a couple of clips in the middle, so be aware of that. Now for the Velcro strips, we had to remove most of these, but we're leaving the 2 outer corners as well as these 2 inner corners. Now these outer ones we cut to length and just use that adhesive glue. And if these inner ones started peeling up, you can use that glue on those as well. And it's just going to help that cover stay down into place. Now to install the heating elements onto this, we're going to have one going up the back and one going across the bottom. And again, just cut those to length. Make sure you pull off the adhesive backing and then use the tape on both ends. And then also, we need to make sure we get the rivets removed on the back side. After that, we can reinstall the seat cover. But as you do this, pay attention to how you route the wires. Just like everything else, we are routing towards the center console. And I'm just using a little bit of duct tape to hold the wire in place until I have that seat cover on. Then we can slide the seat cushion back into place into the seat pan, and we're going to install the new rivets. After that, we can reassemble the seat latch. Now for the wiring, I want to talk about this before we go in the machine, since it's going to be easier to see at the table. So you're going to have one harness per seat, and it's going to come with a switch that trips your relay, and these switches are going to be mounted in that center console. Now for the two front wiring harnesses, we're going to tie these into a pulse bar connector that comes in the kit. You've got some connectors, you can just crimp those on and plug them in, but we're actually going to be soldering today. It's going to be a better connection, and we're not going to have to worry about that down the road. Now for the back seats, you're going to be using some of these eyelets. We are going to solder one connection, and we're just tying into the wiring harness at the back of the machine. So right here on the table, I have the two harnesses for the front seats. So we're taking one of these pulse bar connectors. We're going to strip the ends of the wires back a little bit on those, and then we're going to be chopping off these eyelets on both of our harnesses, and again, stripping back these wires. Okay, with those stripped back, I'm going to prep some heat shrink. I'm going to cut that in half, and we'll slide them over these three wires. And then at this point, we need to make all of our connections. So yellow to yellow, red to red, black to black. Simple as that. I like to split the wires when I twist them together. That way they weave together pretty good. I'm going to solder each one before I move on to the next one. So I'm going to tin the soldering iron really quick, and then we're going to solder this together. So with the heat shrink in place, we're going to go ahead and use the heat gun and shrink them down. The first thing I'm going to remove is the rear center console. I'm using a T40 Torx bit and a plastic rivet removal tool. And just pay attention to the hardware as it comes out. There's a couple shorter screws on the sides. After that, we're going to remove that left side console panel for the front, just using the same tools. Then we're going to release the tabs on that top center console. And then to get the side out, we also have a fuse box right above the gas pedal. We need to loosen that up so we can gain access to more trim clips. There's a few just on the front there, and then we're going to remove that left front center console panel. Now before we begin any wiring, we're going to disconnect the negative battery terminal. That's going to be under your driver's seat. Some of them are going to have, or some machines will have two batteries, so make sure you get them both disconnected. The other battery is going to be on your passenger side. Next, we need to gain access to the pulse bar. So we have a cover right here on ours, just pops up. Some of these are going to have a plastic tray in there. Either way, get it out of the way. Now on the back side of the firewall on the driver's side, I'm going to feed the wiring harness up through next to the existing wiring harness to that pulse bar. And then you're going to disconnect one of these covers from it. And then we're just going to connect our pulse bar connector in. And when you do that, just make sure you can hear it click all the way in. Now you can mount these rocker switches in the dash, but the way the harness lays out, it's going to be a little bit easier to mount these up in the center console. The next thing we want to do is mount these switches up. So just sitting right here, and we're going to use this template, and you can find this on our website, you know, under the product page. There's going to be a couple documents attached to it. So you can print this out and measure it for scale, make sure it's the right size. But what I'm going to do right here, we've got that cup holder out. This is obviously the front center console. I'm going to measure up from this corner about 1 inch on each side. That way, when I use the template, these are both going to be in the same spot. So I'm just putting that bottom edge of the template right there, and then you just want to make sure this is centered up and complements the lines of the console. We'll do those same steps on the other side. So once you have those mounting locations marked out, I'm going to drill a hole in each corner, just a small hole, and then cut the sides out just with a razor blade. So once you have those cut out, just check, make sure the switch is going to pop down into place. And if it's a little too tight, you can use just a wood file and trim that down. And once you have that done, just clip both switches all the way down into place. And when you're pressing them down, obviously you want to check the orientation of this. Have them adjusted the same way we do. And then from here, we're going to route those wires all the way down to the switches. And as I'm routing everything, I'm just following the existing wiring harness and avoiding any pinch points or rotating parts. So we have the wires roughly where we want them. I'm going to start at one of the relays, and I'm going to use one of the connectors that goes to the rocker switches. I'm going to route this to that passenger side. I'm going to clip that in. And then to make sure you have the wires going to the correct locations, I'm going back to that same relay, and then you're going to route the 2 leads for your seat heaters to that same side. So these ones are going to be our passenger side. And we've got this little cutout in the side center console. I'm just going to feed those wires right through there. And then we'll just do those same steps for the driver's side as well. Once you have all the wiring routed, you can go back through and tie everything down. Now for the rear seat switch, we have this cover that we previously removed. I just temporarily set it into place so you can see where we're going. But I'm going to install this rocker switch right here. And to install this, that means we're going to have to notch out this piece of plastic right here. So we're going to go about an eighth of an inch away from that 12-volt socket. And then right at these lines, we're just going to cut this thing off. Okay, from here, you just want to figure out where exactly you want the switch. Then again, use your template and cut it out. And with all that cut out, we'll put the switch in place. Now we're going to do those same steps for the other side. Now to get the 2 harnesses wired up, we need to tie into battery positive power. And that's going to be this red wire, comes straight from the battery. It's going into the starter relay. I'm going to pull this cap off and then use a 10mm socket to make this connection. And these wires, I'm just going to run them up this direction. And I'm even going to run both eyelets through this rubber cap. And I'm just using a couple fingers on the wrench to tighten that down. You want to get it snug, but if you over tighten it, you can break this solenoid. Now I'm just going to work that rubber cap back into place. And for the ground connection, I've got this bolt right here that I'm going to use. And if you're working on a different machine, you can just verify that you've got a constant power and ground using a test light. Next, we need to tie the yellow wires to key on power. So we're just tying right into this 12-volt accessory plug. We've got this orange wire. We've already stripped these wires back. We're going to twist them all together and make a solder connection. Now I'm going to take some heat shrink, install it over the end and shrink that down with the heat gun. And then I'm just going to clamp the end with some pliers. Then from here we just need to route the wiring harness where the center console goes. We're just going to be following the existing wiring all the way to the back, and then we're going to come out by the rear seat belts with our connectors. And then just make sure these 2 switch connectors get routed up to where those switches are going to be. Once you have all the wiring routed, you can go back through and tie everything down. After that, we're going to plug our 2 switches in, and I'm going to set all of the seats in place and make sure everything works, make sure I have my battery connected, and that way if we run into any issues, we can fix it now before we reinstall the center console. So now that we've made sure everything works, we're ready to go back together. So I'm going to take the seats back out. I'm going to start with the front panels and then just work my way back and then reinstall the seats. That's how you install seat heaters on your newer style of Polaris RZR seat. So again, the Pro XPs, the Pro Rs, the Turbo Rs, 2-seaters, 4-seaters, it's all the same. If you have any questions, leave those down in the comments. And if you need these kits, they're available on our website. Just click the link in the description below. And if you want to see more helpful content like this, subscribe to our channel. I'm Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC. Thanks for watching.